Most people know the legendary Allied fighter aces of World War II. Names repeated in books, documentaries, and museums. Men whose victories became part of aviation history. But what if one pilot outscored many of them, and history almost forgot him? A quiet South African with extraordinary aim. A man who flew outdated biplanes against modern fighters and still came back victorious. A pilot who transformed the Hawker Hurricane into one of the deadliest weapons in the Mediterranean skies. This is the story of Pat Pattle, the mysterious ace whose true victory count remains debated to this day, and who may have been the most successful Commonwealth fighter pilot of the entire war. Before we begin, if you enjoy forgotten World War II stories, aviation legends, and warbird history, consider subscribing. Now, prepare for takeoff. Pat Pattle was born Marmaduke Thomas St. John Pattle on July 3, 1914, in South Africa. Long before Europe descended into chaos, he grew up under wide, open skies where flying represented freedom rather than survival. As a young man, he wasn't seen as unusually aggressive or outspoken. Yet beneath the calm personality was remarkable concentration and discipline. In 1936, seeking adventure and purpose, he joined the Royal Air Force. No one around him could have predicted he would become one of the deadliest fighter pilots in history. When World War II erupted, Pattle found himself assigned to No. 80 Squadron RAF, stationed in Egypt. His aircraft was hardly impressive, the Gloster Gladiator. Even at the start of the war, many considered it outdated, a biplane in an age dominated by faster, heavily armed monoplanes. Against modern enemy fighters, surviving seemed difficult. Winning seemed impossible. Then came 1940. Italy entered the war, opening a brutal campaign across North Africa. The desert skies exploded with combat as RAF pilots faced Italian aircraft over Libya and Egypt. Pattle quickly demonstrated something unusual. He wasn't merely brave. He understood air combat almost instinctively. He waited patiently, positioned carefully, then struck with devastating precision. Rather than spraying ammunition from distance, he moved frighteningly close before firing. His attacks were short, calculated, deadly. Enemy pilots often never realized they were vulnerable until rounds tore through their aircraft. Flying the Gladiator, Pat Pattle steadily accumulated victories against experienced opponents. Soon his score climbed toward numbers few expected from a pilot flying an obsolete machine. The biplane chapter of his career alone would have secured his reputation. But his greatest achievements were still ahead. By early 1941, Pattle transitioned into the Hawker Hurricane. Compared to the Gladiator, everything changed. Greater speed, greater firepower, better protection. The Hurricane transformed skilled pilots into lethal opponents. And few pilots possessed more skill than Pat Pattle. Yet just as he adapted to his new aircraft, another crisis erupted. Greece. The Axis invasion forced British forces into desperate defense. RAF squadrons rushed north to support collapsing Allied positions. The situation was chaotic. Aircraft shortages, constant retreats, overwhelming enemy numbers. The perfect conditions for disaster, or for legends. Over Greece, Pattle's reputation grew rapidly. Pilots who flew beside him witnessed extraordinary performances. He seemed able to predict enemy movements before battles fully developed. His situational awareness bordered on unbelievable. Again and again, he intercepted bombers and fighters while leading his men through impossible odds. Reports suggest that during intense periods of combat, he destroyed enemy aircraft at astonishing speed. Some days, multiple victories. Some missions, extraordinary kill counts. His pace became almost unreal. Even now, historians debate his true total because many combat records disappeared during the collapse in Greece. Official numbers remain uncertain. Unofficial estimates climb dramatically higher. Some researchers believe his score exceeded 50 victories. If true, Pat Pattle may have surpassed nearly every Commonwealth ace of the war. But legends rarely receive peaceful endings. By April 1941, German pressure overwhelmed Greece. Retreat seemed inevitable. Exhaustion spread through RAF squadrons. Then illness struck Pat Pattle. Influenza. Witnesses said he was seriously unwell. Weak, barely fit to fly. Friends urged him to remain grounded. He refused. His squadron was still fighting, and he intended to fly beside them. On April 20th, 1941, during fierce combat over Athens, hurricanes launched repeatedly against larger German formations. The odds were terrible, yet Pattle climbed into the cockpit once more. Accounts suggest he continued scoring victories even amid chaos. Then came the final engagement. Enemy fighters closed in. His hurricane was struck. Moments later, Pat Pattle disappeared from the skies he had dominated. He was only 26 years old. Today, decades later, his name remains strangely absent from many discussions about the greatest Allied fighter aces. But among aviation historians, respect for Pat Pattle continues to grow, because perhaps his greatest achievement wasn't simply numbers. It was proving that extraordinary skill could overcome outdated aircraft, impossible odds, and collapsing fronts. History remembers many heroes. Some legends almost vanished entirely. And Pat Pattle may be one of the greatest forgotten aces World War II ever produced. As Pat Pattle's reputation spread through RAF circles, something unusual happened. His fellow pilots stopped measuring success by victories alone. Instead, they judged missions by a simpler question. Was Pattle leading? Because when he was in front, men believed their chances of returning home increased. That kind of trust cannot be awarded with medals. It has to be earned in combat. Again and again. Unlike the popular image of fighter aces as reckless hunters chasing personal glory, accounts from men who served with Pattle describe something different. He was aggressive, but controlled. Confident, but never careless. His priority wasn't adding numbers beside his name. It was protecting formations, covering wingmen, and surviving long enough to fight tomorrow. That balance made him extraordinarily dangerous. Many pilots became aces through courage. A few through talent. The rarest combined talent with discipline. Pat Pattle belonged in that category. The air war over Greece pushed every pilot beyond normal limits. Aircraft shortages meant men often flew multiple missions in a single day. Fatigue became constant. Maintenance crews worked endlessly to keep hurricanes operational. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts. Everything became harder to obtain as Axis forces advanced. Each takeoff carried uncertainty. Would there be enough fuel? Enough support? Enough luck? Yet despite deteriorating conditions, Pattle's claimed victories continued increasing. Some reports suggest there were periods where his score rose faster than almost any Allied pilot at the time. This extraordinary pace later created controversy. Historians attempting to verify his claims faced major obstacles. Record vanished. Witnesses died. Combat reports disappeared during evacuations. Unlike the carefully documented air war over Britain, Greece descended into confusion. As a result, Pat Pattle's final tally became one of World War II aviation's greatest mysteries. Official figures remain conservative. Unofficial estimates remain debated. The truth may never be known. Ironically, uncertainty itself may have hidden his achievements from history. There's another reason Pattle remains overlooked. Timing. Many famous Allied aces survived long enough to write memoirs, give interviews, or build public reputations after the war. Pat Pattle never had that chance. His story ended in 1941. Before El Alamein, before Normandy, before Allied victory. He vanished during one of the war's darkest periods. And history often remembers survivors more clearly than those lost early. The Hawker Hurricane itself experienced something similar. While the sleek Spitfire became an icon, the hurricane quietly carried enormous burdens across multiple fronts. North Africa, the Mediterranean, Greece, the Middle East. Again and again, hurricanes fought brutal campaigns far from public attention. Pilots like Pattle revealed what the aircraft could achieve in expert hands. Because machines alone never create legends. People do. Today, standing beside restored hurricanes in museums, Visitors often read specifications: speed, armament, engine power, operational range, important details. Yet statistics rarely explain what happened when young men climbed into those cockpits, knowing they might never land again. Pat Pattle understood those risks every day. Still, he flew, again and again, until there were no more missions left. Perhaps that is why his story continues to fascinate historians. Not because of uncertain victory totals, not because of debates over records, but because somewhere above deserts and mountains, amid collapsing fronts and impossible odds, a South African pilot briefly became one of the most formidable fighter aces of his generation. And decades later, we are still trying to determine just how extraordinary he truly was.